I'm Amy Dolan, and this is the Feeding People podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Feeding People. I'm Amy Dolan, your host, and I'm so glad that you're with us tonight. We have a very special episode tonight at the table, and it is just so lovely that you have joined us here today. As always, if you're loving the show, please share with your friends on social media. Please rate and review us on iTunes. And whoever this episode might be helpful for, please pass it along. That would mean so much to us. We heard really great feedback last week on a few of our episodes, people sharing with their friends. And as always, that means so much to us. So thank you for doing that. Like I said, we've got a really special episode tonight. I'm here at the table tonight with my best boo, Kelly R. Dolan.
Your best boo, as you so often refer to me.
That's what I call you all the time. Hey, best boo.
Hey, best boo.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, Amy, how are you?
Well, thank you for asking. I've got a cold. It's like, this is like a week-long cold, and so I feel the best I've felt today. But
you're on a good trajectory now.
Yeah.
But it was not good a couple days ago.
No, I mean, it was all the things you could imagine.
Yes.
That no one wants
we
to
wouldn't
hear.
have been able to record at that point.
But feeling better, just a little phlegmy and stuffy. So hopefully the people can still hear what I'm saying.
I think you're coming through loud and clear. Nothing to worry about.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so glad we're doing this episode tonight. I made us a delicious dinner, as I do all the guests, and then brag
If you do
about
say
it.
so yourself.
I made my mom's spaghetti pie recipe, which is like a total favorite, but it's got a lot of cheese in it, which is what makes it a favorite. You are not able to eat cheese.
I am not.
So I substituted the two cheeses that were in there, and it's so good, right?
Yes. You're amazing. Your ability to take things that would otherwise put me in the hospital and make them edible for me, as well as really tasty, is pretty awesome. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love that. This is why I introduced the meal at the beginning of each podcast, because guests are so complimentary. And you, especially, Kelly. Thank
Gives
you.
you a little head start on the episode, right?
Thank you for
We're
that.
going to eventually hit that guest, though, that's like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it was okay.
I know,
And
right.
Then we'll see what kind of hole you can dig yourself out of.
Oh, the ultimate podcast host challenge. To all future guests, please don't do that. Okay, so we've got a really special episode tonight. I'm going to explain in just a minute about how this podcast episode was inspired. But how are you feeling?
I'm feeling better than I was 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. It was a very stressful day.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
But, took a beat, moment of reflection, some deep breaths, little mindfulness meditation, and I'm feeling a little bit better.
Yeah, say more about that, Kelly. You really love the mindful meditation. It's really been helpful to you, right?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
I started meditating about a year ago. I grew up thinking, that meditation was dangerous and bad. The faith tradition that I grew up in said that was a no-no. So it wasn't something that I considered for a long time. And I think I've been open to it for quite a while. And then about a year ago, I read some books and listened to some podcasts and started practicing almost on a daily basis. And it's been really fantastic. So it's good in a moment like today where I need like 15, 20 minutes to just get recentered and present again. But the benefits of it are far more over the long haul. As I practice each day, that's where a lot of the benefit is kicked in.
It's been so fun to watch you on the journey too. I can see how it's really been helpful to you and really does like help calm your spirit and your mind. And I love that. Tonight's episode is a really special one. I'm so glad you're here doing it with me because we're going to tell our story, specifically our story of infertility over the last 10 years and how the table and food have really been a source of healing and comfort in our infertility journey, right?
Yes.
This episode was inspired by Mother's Day a few weeks ago, in which I was anticipating Mother's Day. You know, it's always the worst day for me. And over the years, I've handled it really poorly just because I haven't known exactly what to do. As the years have gone on, I've found, oh, it's kind of a selfish day for me and I can make choices for myself. So that's what I do. And so it was leading up to Mother's Day, and I was on Instagram and I posted a couple stories about what Mother's Day has been for me in the past, how some years I choose to just kind of hide away from the world and stay in bed and watch TV and not really talk to anybody or do anything. Other years I go out and treat myself or whatever. And I was doing these stories on Instagram, just kind of sharing that, and also just I was hoping to give other women permission to be able to do what they needed to do on that day, because there's a lot of pressure on Mother's Day to do the right thing and to be the right thing. Someone recently told me it's like you just can't escape Mother's Day. It just assaults you wherever you go.
Yes.
And so I wanted to just give other women in the journey permission to do what they needed to do on Mother's Day. And the number of DMs and text messages that I got in response to those stories was overwhelming in a good, heartbreaking way. There were so many women who responded telling me their stories of infertility, telling me they hadn't known how to handle Mother's Day, and were just not knowing exactly the right things to do, feeling assaulted on Mother's Day. And so it's been kind of a bittersweet, that's kind of the best word. Like in the 2 weeks since Mother's Day, it's been kind of a bittersweet 2 weeks. Women continue to reach out and want to talk. And I don't mind that. Like I'm thankful to have this opportunity. And also I wish I wasn't in this position. I wish none of us were in this position, but here we are. And so the number of women who reached out from those Instagram stories made me think, maybe it's time for us, Kelly, to share our story in a little bit more detail. Mm-hmm. And, not just to inspire others, that's what we hope for, but also just that our story is out there. And so everyone feels permission to share their story, regardless of where they are. That's what we believe about the table. That's what we believe about the podcast, right? Everyone has a story to share. And unfortunately, this is ours,
yes.
right?
Yes. And like you said, I think we've shared parts of it. Certainly you've shared more about it publicly than I have at this point. And we've done so at a pace that's felt right for us, right? Like for us to try and talk about this during certain parts of the journey would have been, impossible / unhealthy, not good for us. And so we've taken steps to talk about it and be more open with it along the way, which we'll get into a little bit, like kind of how we started to share that with more people instead of it being just about us. But I'm excited that we're at a spot where we feel like we can just share this and tell this part of our story.
Yes, me too. I was thinking that actually as women were reaching out to me, I was so impressed by their vulnerability and their courage so early in their journey. I was just so private. It felt like something I did not want people to know about at all. It was so painful and difficult. And also, I think I told you this so many times, I didn't want to be known for this. I didn't want to be known as Amy Dolan, the woman with no kids.
Right.
And I felt like as soon as I shared that, that's all people would think about me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And who knows? We did what we could. We did what we thought was best. And I do think, I wish I would have shared a little bit more along the journey, but now is the right time. Right. And so now we're able to do it. And I'm okay if people say Amy Dolan, the woman with no children. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Because also Amy Dolan of all the other things, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So let's just give a little summary of our journey. We started trying to have kids maybe 10 years ago, I want to say.
2008, if I remember right. So we'd been married for 5 years
at
that point.
Yeah. And I'd always wanted to be a mom. Did you always want to be a dad?
Definitely.
Yeah. I always wanted to be a mom. my career, my ministry was very important to me. And so we held off trying to have kids for the first couple years because we were very busy with our ministry and our work. And honestly, like that was actually something I worried about. Like I always wanted to be a pastor. I always wanted to be in ministry leading. And I never could totally see how that fit with having kids. But as in all things with life, Kelly, I was like, let's just go for it and it'll work itself out.
Meanwhile, on the other side of things, I of course was holding off because I was wanting to protect what we had at that point. Like I wanted to, this is the only season in which, back then, this is the only season in which we won't have kids. So let's extend it as long as we can. And so.
Right. For all our similarities, there was that difference. Right. So we started trying and we didn't get pregnant, the first year or 2 years. And then, which was difficult. Our friends were having kids, our family were having kids, and it was hard. I always dreamed of having a kid the same age as my sister's kid. And that was hard when it was exciting, but it was hard when she got pregnant and I wasn't. And the months started going by and almost as a reminder of how far apart our kids potentially would be. So all along the way, there are markers like that remind you of how much time has passed and where you're at and how other people's lives are moving forward with your dreams and not your own. And that's really difficult.
Yes. Would you say too, I feel like my memory of it too is those first maybe 12, 18 months, first 2 years, we were trying to have kids. Potentially more of our friends and family were having kids during that 18-month period than any time before or since then.
I mean,
and I'm not exaggerating. Like, I'm not saying just like that was our perception of it. Like, literally, it just was the time when, and specifically when everybody was getting pregnant for the first time.
I mean, I don't know. Yes. To me, it's felt like people are always having kids all the time. Yes. So I probably couldn't say like one season felt like a lot more than the other. It always feels like a lot of people are pregnant around me.
Yes.
But yes, a lot of people at that time were.
Yes.
So maybe after 2 years, 2.5 years, we went to the doctor and we figured out what was going on and we had some options. And it was really overwhelming. I mean, I feel like those couple of years were probably the darkest years of my life. Were they the darkest years of your life?
For sure.
Yeah. And it was the choices you have to make, like when you're in that situation, are so overwhelming. Do you remember this? Sorry, this isn't that funny, but it is.
Which story will you go into? Because there's plenty, and we won't get into all of them here. But.
Do you remember we went to the infertility doctor once, and it was such a terrible experience. Like, it was so bad. There was, I would say, lacking pastoral care. And I remember walking out, we had all this information, all these choices to make. And what do I say? I'm like, they need a pastoral care person in them. They need a meet. I was like fixated the whole way. This will be my career. And then you were like, I don't think that's what you want to do.
I think some of the way we coped with some of the stress and difficulty was to figure out how we could have made that process better. But some folks have had wonderful, wonderful journeys through IVF. We did not. Like,
no.
At every turn, for a million different reasons, both in terms of the kind of care that we received, like you said, just missing the personal aspect of it, walking into appointments and the doctor literally having no clue, even though we'd seen her 2, 3, 4 times before, no clue why we were there.
She had the wrong file once, remember?
Yeah, forgetting details about us. I mean, it was bad. And then through to, we literally went down the road a couple of different times. And then for 2 different separate reasons at 2 different times, we got stopped kind of dead in our tracks and told we couldn't move any further. We just couldn't, physically, it wasn't possible for us to go any further with IVF. And that was the darkest, I think.
That was the darkest.
Looking back, for me at least, that was the darkest, was thinking that the one thing that we still had left as a solution to have biological children of our own was just gone. It was taken away from us. Yeah. And so that was definitely the darkest.
That was the darkest. I remember a very terrible moment sitting in the IVF office. You had to sign all this paperwork. Mm-hmm. You remember this? Mm-hmm. And they asked us who we would like to sign over if we did wind up with fertilized embryos and something happened to the 2 of us, who would be the parents.
It's like, what the hell? You're already dealing with like some of like the heaviest, weightiest like questions and considerations you've ever had to ask before. And then they're asking you, well, if you died, what happens to your embryos?
And I'll never forget. And it's also just like, okay, maybe I do want to switch careers, Kelly. But like we were sitting in like an office with like fluorescent lights. It was like a break room. That's what I actually feel like it was. It was like the staff break room, and there was not food or coffee. And there were fluorescent lights, and they were like...
They were loud. I remember they were loud.
Buzzing, and they were like, who will be the parents to your embryos if you die? And I was like, I'm going to have a heart attack in this moment. Like I think I had a panic attack actually.
And no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that lightly. No, I meant that actually very compassionately.
As if I were unsure. No, Amy, everyone knew you did.
You did. Yes.
I don't remember if we actually like signed it or not, or if I was just like, I have to get out of this room right now.
We did. We made it through it, but barely.
But then anyway, so that was absolutely the darkest season. It was so overwhelming. And I remember through it all feeling so much pressure, and not only like pressure to make the absolute right choices for my body, for your body, for our future, all this, but also like it always felt like every day we were losing time. Mm-hmm. And so like all the decisions had to be made perfectly and quickly. And that was just way too much to handle. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was a couple years of all of that back and forth and pressure and stress and all of it. And then I remember we were like, I need a break from this. Mm-hmm. I need a break. I need to not be, it just consumes your thoughts and your mind. And I said, I need a break. And we took a break, and that was one of the most wonderful things ever.
Yes.
I just remember being like, I'm not going to think about this for who knows how long. And when the time is right to return to it, we'll return to it. Right.
Yeah.
So during that time, we were very, very private about it, but we did share with a few people. Our family knew, and a couple of very close friends mm-hmm. knew. And even that was really difficult, right? And I just wanted to say, I don't do this really much on the podcast, but I did just want to like use a moment to say to people, if you are walking alongside someone who is in the middle of their infertility journey, I remember in those years, the people who did know, what was most important to us was them initiating the conversation with us, because there were so few people who knew. The people who did know, when they would ask us how it was going or how we were doing or what the latest was, it meant the world to us. And specifically what was so helpful about that was that we didn't have to bring it up every time. And I'm not saying that that's what every couple wants who's going through this, right? But if you are walking alongside someone in the middle of this journey, face the awkward conversation. It's always awkward. Just assume it's going to be awkward. You can even start your question with that. Hey, I don't know if this is the right time, or if you want to answer this. I loved when people said like, you have permission to say,
yes,
now is not the right time to talk about this for me. But be the one to bring up the question. How's it going? Where are you at? Is this a good time to talk about it? I mean, I felt like that would change the mood of our day,
yes.
right?
Yes. For somebody to say, once we shared it with them, you know, can I ask you about this on a regular basis? And for us to say yes. And then even when they would then in the future months, you know, say, you know, hey, where are things at? How are things going? And we'd say,
yeah,
sorry, I just can't do this today. I can't talk about it. And they would like honor that, receive that, still like hold space with us. But then a month later, a couple months later, something like that, or even a couple weeks later, say, hey, is it okay if I ask again? That meant the world. And for people to know that just because we didn't want to talk about it in a specific moment because we were totally overwhelmed by wherever we were at in the process didn't mean we didn't want to talk about it forevermore.
That's right.
It's so difficult. We've been through this. We've been in this a long time. And I still, if I meet somebody who's in a similar situation, it's so hard to know.
I never want to ask anybody.
You don't want to be the one, because you think just similar to like all things with grief, right? You don't want to create additional grief. Right. You don't want to like spark the grief in someone. If they're having a good day, you don't want to make it a bad day. But like you said, facing the awkwardness of that, just saying, is now an okay time to ask? Might I ask about this? Was huge for us.
It was huge, right? You can just assume neither party wants to talk about it.
Yes.
But it's good to talk about it.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right. So I want to say something about the role of food during that season too, because one thing that I've noticed that was true for me during that time, and also a lot of women that I talk to now say we all kind of agree on this, going through infertility is really different than like having a one-time surgery and then coming home. Like when you have typically when someone has surgery and comes home, people surround them with food, right? You assume they can't make dinner for themselves and their family for that week or the next couple weeks. You start the meal train and you organize everyone to make food. The problem with infertility journey is that for most people, it is so long. It's so ongoing and it is all consuming. I would describe it as having a surgery every single day. There were so many days I could not even think clearly enough to know if we had food in the fridge, if we had groceries, what we were going to have for dinner. And that was during a season I was really loving cooking and discovering cooking. And so I remember the times people showed up out of nowhere at our door, in our apartment with food. Mm-hmm. And that was everything. I can remember the chicken soup. I can remember the casseroles. I can remember everything. And I remember a cookie bouquet someone sent. I remember flowers someone sent on a random Monday. Like nothing had happened per se. There were no procedures or treatments, but it was smack dab in the middle of everything. And please do that. Please, please, please do that. If you're walking alongside someone who is going through this, assume every day is a surgery. And the best you can, organize the people around you to shop their groceries, make their meals, have food delivered, whatever it is.
Yes, it's beautiful. I feel like, I'd be interested to know. I feel like this is where some of your Jewish background and specifically like family history like plays such a strong role in how you like received that and how you view that now, the ability to like show people love through presence, not presence like PRES.
I mean, that's nice too.
No, but like by being with them as well as then the food. I feel like that's so much more like baked into your Jewish faith tradition than it is probably our Christian evangelical tradition that we came from.
I don't want to use the word smother, but now that I'm a 40-year-old Jewish woman, I gladly take on the role of smothering all of the people in my life. So yes, a Jewish family, specifically a mom, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunts, sisters, who are able to make the food and comfort with food. Yes, that is just deep, deep in who we are.
Yes. I feel like one of the things I learned specifically from you a little bit through this process, but that I feel like I learn now as I watch you interact with people who are going through grief or pain or sickness or the like, is like specifically with food, not asking,
yes,
do you need food?
Yes.
Do you need a meal? Just, I will bring you a meal.
Yes.
I will bring you food. Correct?
I love that you said this.
Yes.
I love that you said this. I mean, like, I love to be bossy in all of life, but specifically when it comes to food, you didn't need to affirm that so quickly.
Sorry. No.
Leadership also, some call it. Specifically when it comes to food, though, because we are so conditioned in our culture to not accept food and care in our times of grief and loss. And so when someone offers, would you like could I drop off a cast? You're going to say no. Like, our culture is like, no, even though I'm like, give me that casserole right now. So I really do like to be bossy and say, a lot of times I'll say even now, like, I'm making a double batch of whatever. I'll be in your neighborhood tomorrow morning. Would that be helpful to you? Because I don't want to be too bossy that they can't say no if it's not.
Right.
But if it is, I've thought through all the details. Here's the food. Here's the time. You don't got to pick it up. Eat it when you want. All of that. You got to do if you're walking alongside someone going through infertility, you have to do the hard work. And It really sucks. It does. Nobody wants to be in this situation on either side. But you got to do the hard work of making the food, going out of your way to drop it off, putting it in a pan that's disposable, making sure all the food is allergy specific and friendly to that person or that family. You have to do the hard work of that. And so often, you know, I've said this so many times, but like I've tried to eliminate the phrase, let me know, when it comes to this. And I think a lot of us use those words to not do the hard work. And so we'll say, let me know if a casserole would be helpful to you tomorrow. 100% of the people are going to say no because they don't want to put them out. They don't want to. And it's a lot of work to say yes and then figure out all the details. And so eliminate the words, let me know, and say, I'm making a double casserole. I'll be in your neighborhood tomorrow morning. Is it helpful if I drop it off? So that the only work the other person has to do is yes or no. Mm-hmm. Okay, so food was really, really helpful. Friends, I mean, I think about our really good friends, Sean and Sarah, who lived in our neighborhood at that time. And, I see a little tear, Kelly, even as I say it. Why did you move, Sean and Sarah?
Seriously.
We would go to the little corner bar every Friday night with them, and that was such a light. And just being at that little pub every single Friday night with them, they would ask us. I mean, Sarah would ask us before we even sat down. Yeah. She was so wonderful about that. And we would say all the things in that very sacred bar. Mm-hmm. And I think having people you can trust, having people who are safe, having people who are going to ask the question, and then a table where you can go and feel safe to talk is everything, right?
Yes. There were weeks where I feel like just get me to Friday night with Sean and Sarah.
Yeah.
Just get me to Friday night with Sean and Sarah, and we'll be okay for this week.
Oh.
Seriously.
Guys, come back to Chicago. They moved.
No guilt trip.
This is actually the whole purpose of this episode. Come back, Sean and Sarah. We're just sitting at the bar on Friday nights alone.
Just waiting for you to walk back through
waiting
the door.
For someone to ask us what's going on. Okay. So we carried on in our journey. We explored all sorts of options. I remember we explored adoption and foster care and all of that. And just none of it ever felt right. And we just kind of kept going as we were going. And almost 6 years ago now, we moved to the city. And I remember thinking, we've always wanted to live in the city, but I remember thinking, moving into a new physical space is going to be the fresh start that we need in this journey, because that apartment had become such, to me, a symbol of this terrible, horrible thing that we were going through.
Yes.
And so when we moved to the city, we always call our first landlord here in the city Mario. Well, we call him Mario because that's his name. But we call Mario our angel because he gave us this just so cute, super small apartment for a really short term for a really great price. It was like he knew we needed to find our footing in the city.
Yeah, we just needed to get to the city.
We needed
fast,
to get here.
And we didn't know exactly where we wanted to live or what kind of place. We just were like, we just got to get there. And there's really no reason he should have given us the arrangement that he gave us for 6 months. But it was an absolute gift.
And I feel like that began to change everything for me. Mm-hmm. Being in the city, of course, started to help me settle into who I was meant to be. We both have said we were made to be in a city environment, and specifically Chicago. And so being able to finally be here and kind of relax into who we were and who we were made to be. And then also to be around other people who didn't have kids was actually such a new thing for us. Where we lived in the suburbs, every single person our age was married and having kids, which is great and fine. I wish that had been true for us too. But here in the city, everyone is living their own lives. Everyone is living a life. And so we met people right away who are our age and married or partnered and didn't have kids. And I just remember for the first time feeling like I didn't stick out, or that that wouldn't be the first question. I mean, that was the first question everyone asked us when they met us, right?
Yes.
How long have you been married? Do you have kids?
In the suburbs.
When we were in the suburbs. Yeah. And someone asked us last night, actually, at Sunday Supper Church, if we had kids. And it actually like stuck out to me about how rarely that happens now.
Yes. And it was so lovely the way that she asked
it. Was so
in
lovely
the conversation
that she asked.
Followed up, but it did
was
stand.
Perfect.
It did.
It really stood out. I thought,
out.
wow, I haven't been asked this question in a long time. I'm actually okay to answer.
Yeah.
And so moving to the city and kind of settling into who we were meant to be and finding healing and friendship and new footing and other people like us was the start, I feel, of a kind of a fresh start, right?
Yes,
was
definitely.
It for you too?
Oh yeah, definitely. We had this conversation the other night, and we were talking about other things, but it kind of came back to this as a point of reference for us. Yeah, the suburbs for us felt like there was sort of 1A, 1B, and 1C track that everybody was on that our age. And when we realized we weren't going to be able to be on that track, it just felt like the divide was getting further and further.
Yep.
And by no fault of everybody else. I mean, that was, you know what I mean? It's by no means blaming anybody else. But when we came to the city, it was like, oh, everybody is doing something different here. And yeah, it felt like that pressure felt like it was taken off in a way. And I think it took us a while still to let go of some of that pressure internally for ourselves, which maybe we'll get to that. But in terms of the external pressure, it changed dramatically when we moved to the city. And I don't know that would be everybody's experience that moved from the suburbs to the city, but we've talked to people that we've even said that might be the case for them as well.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if it is for others.
Yes, right. So maybe 2 years living here in the city, finding our footing, kind of finding some new life, still trying to decide like what we were going to do about having kids. We started Sunday suppers. And I always think like this, I'm such a weirdo, but like even through this journey, I was working in children's ministry. And then when we moved to the city, I was a family pastor. And so just like day in and day out, I was with couples and parents and kids. And like, why did I do that actually?
It does seem a little crazy now, but it actually is, I think, one of the most impressive things that I can say about that season of your life. Like, it's crazy to me that like you were able to engage and be with people and lead in that way, just around kids and family all the time. And I don't feel like you compartmentalized your pain.
No, there were days that were terrible.
Yeah. You like faced up to it, like squared up to it. But it's really impressive.
Thank you. But because of that job, I realized that I needed a place. I needed a table specifically where I could share like really how terrible this was for me, because I really couldn't do that in my job. It wasn't appropriate for me to do that in my job. And so I knew that for me, needed a place where I could be safe and be able to really say the terrible things I felt inside during that time.
It's so funny, for all the like times we've reflected on like the start of Sunday Suppers, I forgot that this is such a big part of it, was that the aspect of you had wonderful relationships with a lot of different people, but it was in a space in which, in your role as a family pastor, there just wasn't a lot of room or margin to be able to say, can I tell you about how pissed off I am about this, or how sad I am about this? Or
yeah. And the number of times people in the church got pregnant. Yeah. I mean, it's all bittersweet. Everything is bittersweet. Of course, was I thrilled for people at church getting pregnant, and also was that a lot to handle every single day. Yes. Yep. And so we started Sunday Suppers. A lot of people know the story, but we asked our friends, there were 9 of us total, including us, and we asked our friends to come every single Sunday night throughout the entire summer to our apartment. We had a really great balcony space with a big table, so it was the way we could see everyone around the table. And we just set up the premise right from the beginning. This isn't going to be a Bible study. This isn't going to be, like, there's not going to be an agenda. It's not a meeting, but it is for the purpose of deeper friendships. You and I were both feeling that. I remember we had a lot of people in our lives, but we're feeling the lack of really deep friendship where you could really say all the things.
Yes. And specifically like in a group setting, I think we had had some pretty good one-to-one like relationship. I felt like for that, for me at least, I felt like I had some pretty good like one-on-one relationships. And part of this was even like, can a few of them be in the room together and like have a meal together?
Yes.
So.
And I think that is an important thing. Like of our friends, Matt and Anna and Drew and Jen and Jeremy and Karen and Brooklyn, some of them knew each other, some of them didn't know each other, and they were from different circles of our lives. We just knew we had experienced deep friendship and vulnerability with each of them.
Yes.
And so that's really important. Like if you're looking to like create a space like this for yourself where you can have deeper conversations, like start with people you've already experienced that with, because it really is a sacred thing to build.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we invited everyone over and we said this was the point of this is for deep friendships. Come every Sunday night, I'll make dinner and we'll sit around and we will share what's going on in our lives. And I mean, that's what we did. It really did. I remember so many Sunday nights people would leave and I'd be like, Kelly, it's working. It's what we hoped and so much more. And I remember that being such a sacred place for us specifically in our infertility journey. I remember one of those Sundays all of our friends, all of those people knew what we were going through. All the people, everyone knew the details. I remember one of those Sundays we were like considering foster care or something. And someone asked us, we spent maybe the whole night. What are the details? How are you feeling? What about this? What about that? And I remember thinking afterwards, wow, I have never had that much time and space and good question asking and listening. Oh my gosh, the level of listening to us was so special. It was so special. And I think a lot of times people say to me, if they're walking through this journey with someone, they'll say, I just don't know the right things to say. I'm so afraid to say the wrong things. And that's so lovely. Like that heart is so lovely. I always feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing about everything. And normally I do. But like that cannot prevent you from saying something. And I think one of the best ways to walk into this with someone, one of the best ways to know that you are saying at least most of the right things is to sit at a table around some shared food. It could be just the two of you. It could be 4 of you, 9 of you, whatever. And really listen, like really ask great questions. How does that feel? Really empathize. That I can't even imagine. That must be terrible. What could be worse? I mean, say things like that. And then really, really listen to what the person's saying, especially if you've not been through it yourself. The table gives such an opportunity to be able to look across the table and see the person and think like, wow, I am hearing you say things about this journey that I never would have guessed and never would have known. And then let that be your education moving forward about the right things to say.
That's so interesting. I feel like the thing I learned from our friends during that time was the power of just in the listening at times, specifically, I'm sure when they didn't know what to say, was just reflecting back exactly what they've heard. Right?
Yes,
like,
yes.
We say, this was a really, really shitty week for us. Pause. And then we hear back, seems like it was a really, really shitty week for you. Just even that, right? Like the power of just like feeling like someone is reflecting back to you and understands what your week was like. I learned that from them and the way that they responded to us during that season.
Yes, that's good, Kelly. That's really good. Right. You want to be really prescriptive or give advice. Everyone wanted to give me advice, which again was like so lovely. Like, oh, I heard a friend got pregnant like this. Have you tried this? Guys, please don't do that. Don't do that. Like if the person you're walking alongside wants advice, they'll ask you, hey, do you know someone who you could refer me to? If they don't ask for that, don't give that. Just be present, listen, reflect.
Yes.
So cool you said that, Kelly.
Yes.
Love that. So here we are now today, still no kids, right? And this year for Mother's Day, as it was leading up to Mother's Day, I was thinking about how I actually wanted to be at a little table with a few other people, which I'm not sure that's ever happened in 10 years, right? And so we invited a couple people over who were all everybody's situation is different, but we're also going through things that made Mother's Day really difficult. And so it was kind of like hey, what we all have in common is that this is a terrible day for us. Would we all be able to come to a table and be together, mope, complain, be just as we are, and eat some food? And I can't believe people said yes and came.
Said yes quickly, too.
They said yes quickly. It was like it was what we all needed this year.
Right.
And so we had a little dinner. Everybody brought food, which was really nice. And we talked about how the day was hard for each of us. And we were just together. That's what was so nice. Mm-hmm. We were just together on this terrible day. There's something about being together in the middle of your grief and pain that's really helpful.
Yeah, I feel too like, and I think you sensed this even when you suggested that and when you did, you said you wanted to do that. I was like, you do? It's so different than previous Mother's Days. But it is because Mother's Day feels, I mean, to me, even as a guy, it feels like this. So I can only imagine for women what this day is like. The assault, just can't get away from it. To have a space where you knew you could get away from it. Where
I didn't think about it like that.
The conversation, whether it was going to be, like you said, like we're going to be mopey together, we're going to complain about things, we're just going to share our pain, or whether it's just going to be fun. The one thing it's not going to be by design is the thing that you're working so hard to avoid the rest of the day. You know, not to be mean or disparaging to people who are celebrating Mother's Day and feeling wonderful about either being a mother or about their mothers, anything like that. But that's what it is all day long.
All day long.
And so there's just very few spaces where it's not about that, let alone it's a safe space to not have to feel those things.
I love that. That's so nice, Kelly. Right. I want to think about that even in the future. Like, how can I continue to like create that for others?
Yes.
That's so lovely.
Yes.
Okay, so here we are at this podcast, still with no kids, as I've already mentioned. And I feel like, I mean, I will never, ever be thankful for this journey. I will never thank God for putting us through this. This was a terrible, horrible thing God did. FYI.
Said the pastor.
FYI. And also, unfortunately, I feel emotional saying this. I can see the ways in which it has shaped me. Mm-hmm. And I really hate that. Mm. And when I think about younger women or women going through this journey, I wish that I could fast forward for them to the end of it. Mm-hmm. And I hate that life doesn't allow for that. So here we are. I would say we're close to the end of this journey. Mm-hmm. In the last year, even, we've used words with each other about how awesome it is to not have kids, which I feel like we've never really been able to allow ourselves those feelings or those thoughts or to speak those words out loud. I know.
And certainly without guilt. I feel like for a while we dabbled in celebrating it, but would always feel guilt about it. Like, well, you can't say that. You can't like own up to the fact that you're celebrating you don't have kids. That's terrible.
And I'm so superstitious. I felt like the minute we said it out loud, we would never have kids.
I feel a little bit of that even in this moment. Now that we've talked about it on a podcast, or we're talking about it on a podcast, now it's going to happen.
But it's really awesome not having kids. And I'll always wish that we did, of course. But I'm also starting to see for the first time maybe how this was what was intended for us, because we have so many things in our lives that I'm not sure would have totally been possible for me or for you or for us if we had had the 10 children I was dreaming of. I'm just mentioning that number now. And so, okay, that's something, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think about often is that I prayed nonstop. We prayed nonstop for kids in our lives, and our lives are so filled with kids.
Yes.
It's kind of embarrassing, I feel like. Yeah. Our nieces, our nephews, our very close friends and their kids. I mean, it's just, I often feel like God, in God's generosity and kindness, not in judgment or, a stern voice, but in God's kindness and love often tells me, Amy, sweetheart, I have given you kids in your life.
Yes.
And so for that, I'm thankful.
Yes. Yes. Me too.
So here we are. I don't know. What else, Kelly? How does one wrap up a show like this?
Wrap up a show like this? I love how you always say the distinction between like you're never going to be you're set in your way about it. Like you're never going to be grateful for this.
I'm so set in my way about this.
And yet like that in one hand and on the other hand, like so open to seeing what you might be able to see given where things are at. I do not do a good job of holding things that different in tension. So I feel like I've grown in that way in this journey by watching you and being your partner through this, which is really amazing. Like you said, feel like we're coming to the end of our journey of wanting kids and trying to have kids. Now that we're potentially at the end of that journey, what does that mean for the journey that's ahead for us?
Yeah, it's bitter. Everything is bittersweet about this. It's really sweet to be present with women for me in this. And also it's really bitter. I start most conversations saying, I hate that we're both here. I hate that I've been through this and I hate that you're going through this. And that's why we're talking right now. I hate it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It's an opportunity for me at least, to be present. I really hate this about Christians and pain and grief. Christians really, in my experience, are the worst at handling pain and grief, which seems odd because most of our story is centered around the death of our Savior. Yes. But often I just feel like Christians talk about pain as like practical and purposeful, as like, well, that was for a purpose. And so that is not at all how I see my life now. That the pain that I went through the last 10 years was absolutely not for the purpose of being here today to be with other women. That's ridiculous. And I really do believe like pain is not for purpose. Like that just does not feel like God to me at all. It feels awful, like an awful characteristic of God. Pain is pain. And like, I always think like pain and loss and grief and death are never the way the world was supposed to be. That was not the way the world was supposed to be. And so you can say that. You can claim in your moment, this is not the way the world was supposed to be. And I'm not into this. But here I am. And so what is this moment for me? What is this moment for others? But not at all like there was a plan or a purpose for your pain. And so being here now, I don't see it that way at all. I just find myself here. And I'm staying present to what it means to me, how much is too much, how much I want to engage, how much I don't want to engage. And for me, it always does start with food. I start most conversations with, do you need food? Because obviously like food means so much to me, but I'm coming to believe more and more that food is actually part of God's salvation, part of God's healing. I'm so captivated by the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, in which after he does the miracle with the loaves and the fish, the story says the people were fed and they believed. And it's like, what the heck does that mean? Because they experienced his miracle? No, because they were fed, literally fed food, they believed. And so I really do think food, physical food, has the power to create belief, create hope, create healing, create connection, help us grieve, help us mourn, help us one day again find joy. And so for me, if I can start most conversations with other women going through this, do you need food? To me, it starts the conversation towards healing and joy and just togetherness in the midst of the grief and the pain.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. And I've seen you. I watch you do that. Seriously, I watch you do that so often. I can't count the number of days, even in the past few weeks, where a text comes through from somebody who's either going through something similar to our journey or something completely separate. And your like knee-jerk response is, we'll bring you food.
Yes.
Like you said, I'm making a double batch of something.
Yes.
Or I am now, right?
Yes.
I'm making a double batch of something now. I'll bring it over tomorrow. And I say this to you all the time, not my first response at all. I learn and I grow from it every day watching you do it.
Thanks, Kelly. What would be your final words? I mean, and specifically to men, is there anything like you'd specifically like to say to men about food or gathering somewhere together, or just a word of encouragement for other men in similar situations?
Yeah. Seriously, I don't love talking in like gender stratified terms. Oh, this particular gender, or those who identify with this gender feel are typically this way, the other gender is this, and stuff like that. I really do feel like, though, culturally, men struggle greatly with knowing how to share their grief. And so oftentimes just don't.
Yeah.
And I've certainly been guilty of that. There are times today where I'm guilty of that, where I feel the like urge or sense that like I should share something that I'm grieving about, whether it's in this journey or some other part of our life, with someone else or with a group of people. And I just don't, right? And I would say I probably at times took some courageous steps, and at other times I just found myself plopped into a situation, whether it was by design, like Sunday suppers, or just a conversation. I remember real specifically a conversation with a friend who was a few years older than me and had been through this in his own family, and just out of nowhere over coffee once just asked me flat out, like, are you and Amy having trouble having kids? And I was so like dumbfounded that he was that bold in asking, but I was like, okay, here I am. I've got a chance to either like go there with this guy who's so bravely asked me it or not. And I think that time I chose to, right? And so I would just say like, by design or by finding yourself plopped in the middle of a circumstance where you have the opportunity to just share whatever it means for you to take a step of sharing vulnerably about your grief, about your loss, about your pain. And I would agree, it's almost always easier and feels more right and good. And like there's something magical happening when it's around food.
Yeah.
And so, especially I would say this, if you are in a spot where you've not yet shared that grief with anyone, is there anyone that you know that has been a safe space when you needed to share something vulnerable, or you have been connected with in that way? Take that step of sharing this part of your journey with them.
Take a step. Kelly, that's so lovely. Thank you so much for talking about this with me. This was a really big step for us.
Thank you. Yeah, it was.
I love you. And
I love you.
I'm not thankful that this has been our story, but I'm thankful to have done this with you.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And we will see you again soon.